Duty of care is a really important concept related to occupational health and safety. It basically means that you have a special relationship, or where a special relationship exists, for example, between a teacher or a special needs EA or a teacher aide with a particular student who you're put in charge to look after. Even if you're just supervising with another group of more senior staff members, you have a duty of care to make sure that you look after those students in the best way possible to minimise harm to them. And you can breach duty of care if they're injured and it's because of your actions or something that you didn't do. An important aspect of duty of care is that the behaviour or the incident that has caused injury was foreseeable and preventable. You could break your duty of care or breach your duty of care if, for example, a student walks into a chair and falls over. If you left the chair in a position that was dangerous at the bottom of the steps or around a corner or something like that, if it was foreseeable that the student could reasonably have been injured by something, you've breached your duty of care. And preventable, of course, they sort of mean the same thing in this sense. The idea that you could have prevented it. Another example is, do you ever remember when your teachers were constantly on your back about making sure your bags weren't laying around on the floor or all lined up neatly just outside the classroom? That's because every now and then a student will be running or even walking and they'll trip over the straps of the backpacks. Preventable and foreseeable, usually due to experience as well, to prevent a student from potentially injuring themselves, breaking their leg or whatever. It's really important with duty of care and OHS that you're constantly on the lookout, thinking about what could potentially cause harm. Generally, the rule of thumb is, if you're going to work in education for a long period of time, if you're a bit lazy with your duty of care, even if it's something simple, eventually something will happen. Eventually a student's going to get in trouble or go into as far as hurting themselves. Okay. The reasonable person test is what courts use to determine whether you've breached your duty of care. You have a duty of care to do what was reasonable in that situation. So students are going to get hurt. It's the nature of being in a school, the type of activities you do, the number of students, maturity levels and all those types of things. But did you do in that particular situation what a reasonable person would, given your training, given your experience and given the activity and the history of the student? So for example, if you've got a student that has Asperger's and you send them off on their own at lunchtime to go do something on the other side of the school and they wander off and get hit by a car, a reasonable person who's done training with disabilities, say as Cert 4, and who's worked with those students for a long period of time and know that the student has a history of wandering, letting them go off on their own is not a reasonable thing, and you could have breached your duty of care. The other important concept, and probably the most difficult one to get a grasp of, is this idea of professional judgment. Professional judgment means doing what someone with a significant amount of experience would do in the situations where there are there's no black or white rules or regulations. For example, there's a rule that a student isn't allowed to go into the bush or off school grounds at all. But what if the football lands within 10 or 15 metres when they're kicking it at recess and lunch? Should you let a student just go off and quickly grab the ball? Maybe you'll go get it yourself, I don't know. But in those type of situations, you're using your professional judgment when no clear rule exists or it's clearly reasonable to break the rule in that particular circumstance. It's not a serious thing. In that case, using your professional judgment. And of course, if let's say the student goes and gets the football, gets bitten by a snake and loses their leg or something, and you get taken to court, well, the court will say, were you reasonable in what you did? And in that case, I mean, probably so. But if it was a different occasion where that morning there was a couple of snakes spotted in that area, and you let the student go get the football in that bush, well, that's probably not a reasonable thing to do if it was a hot day, for example. Okay? Duty of care, super important. There is also, every state has their own Department of Education policies on duty of care. Make sure you read them every now and then. They're usually pretty simple and they're well written these days. They're not full